Hello, my name is Brian. I've always dreamed of building a family adventure rig. After seeing countless videos and blogs on others doing it, I figured I could try my luck and give it a shot. My Jeep Wrangler just wasn't cutting anymore for my family of 4, our gear, and dogs. I wanted something classic that had power to tow, easy to work on, and could hold the whole family. So I did exactly what you aren't supposed to do. I bit off more than I could chew. I bought 2 vehicles and thought I could somehow meld them together with a body swap using my basic building skills. So follow along while I try to tackle this project and complete it on a shoestring budget in my tiny garage.
Oh God, I got a lot to go.
On this episode, I'm going to walk you through what I did to install both the air conditioning knobs and unit under the dash. This was a little bit of a challenge because figure out a way how to add these knobs without them looking too out of place. Some people just use that plastic piece right there that Vintage Air provides. I didn't want to do that, so I wanted to switch the knobs to the dash. Now the problem was, when I installed them, I wasn't completely thinking about how large the gauge was that was going to sit in the middle there in that middle rectangle. The lip was fairly significant, and I didn't really think about that. I kind of presumed it'd be maybe 1/8 of an inch, but in reality it was closer to 1/3 or 1/2 an inch. And so after I drilled all 4 of these holes, it didn't sit flush. And I couldn't figure out why at first, and then it dawned on me. I drilled the holes too low. It was really frustrating because I drilled holes in very thin sheet metal, and in order to fix those holes, I would have to do a skill I'm not very comfortable with, which is welding. So what I did was I took a piece of copper and with a magnet pushed the copper up against the holes and then formed pools of weld in the middle, and then slowly pushed those pooled welds out to catch onto or link to the sheet metal. The process took a little bit of time, but it wasn't terrible. I actually practiced on a piece of flat bar first in order to improve my skills a little bit, and then I used a grinding wheel in order to grind down the welds. It's not going to be perfect, but I don't need it to be. The interior of the vehicle, including the dash, is going to be sprayed with lizard skin, which is both an acoustic and insulating polyurethane spray. That spray will then be covered by a at-home bedliner kit called Raptor Liner. Once I fixed my mistakes, I then went back to the drawing board. In the center of the dash is a wiper control. Through the dash is the wiper control module. It's quite large, and it prevented me from moving the knobs just further up. So after putting on some blue tape and drawing it out, I felt comfortable with what I had. It wasn't going to be perfect, but it was going to be 2 dials on each side. And here was the point that was going to be hard, was I was going to have to get them perfectly level and in a line across. Not easy to do in a garage that's not level to begin with and in a car that's around 70 years old. I did my best, took a lot of measuring points, and hopefully the end result is what I wanted. But I put the 4 knobs in across the top, one to control air, one to control heat, one to control coolness, and then one to control flow, where that goes either up through the air vents onto the windshield or down to our feet. So with all of that done, I then had to re-drill. I then reinstalled all the knobs and was very happy with how they turned out. I then came back with the gauge and installed it, and I thought that the results were something I really liked. The knob at the bottom is for the headlights, and the 4 knobs for the air conditioning controls. The ignition key to the left there, and at the very top is the windshield wiper knob. While I had the gauge cluster out, I made the decision to remove all of the gauges. I wanted to test them to make sure that they worked before I went through all this effort, and 2, clean them up a little bit. 70 years of sunlight really changed the way that these looked. Went through great effort to take it apart as cautiously as I could. It's not a super easy task. I found another owner who had done a really nice job of providing some guidance on how to do that. In short, just take your time. And then I took off the bezel, and it was made of chrome, and I used some magic eraser and a few other products in order to shine it up. It went from looking okay to looking very shiny in about 30 minutes or so. Probably put more effort into it than I truly needed to. I guess there's worse vices than being a fanatic about having something being shiny. The tips of the gauge needles were originally red in color. Over the years, the red faded dramatically, so I ordered some paint. I listed it there in the video and painted the tips. I got this idea from a blog post that I saw on Old Willys forum where another user had done it, and the results were really quite nice. So I tried to follow their lead. It was interesting, one poster indicated that adding too much paint might affect the calibration of these gauges. I'm not super concerned with it. It's such a light amount of paint, I can't imagine it affects it too much, and if it does, then I guess I'll just have to deal with it. I just want them to work-ish. I think probably the reality is going to be that I will have these wires that connect to these gauges also connect to a secondary gauge so that I can get a really accurate reading. I'm toying with the idea of having a digital readout on a old Kindle or iPad that I have so that I have a backup. I ended up mounting an AC unit inside of the dash. I ordered a vintage air AC unit. I think it's the Compact 2. And it came with all of these brackets, but none of the brackets really worked for my application, and I was a little frustrated by that, but I thought, you know what, maybe I should make some of my own. So I started off by making some out of just some flat bar that I had laying around my workshop, and then used those in order to make sturdier ones to hold it in place. I'm glad that I did not seal over the hood scoop area of the wagon. Having it open has allowed me to use it significantly in order to install this AC system. Basically, there were two hinges that were initially there for the air scoop, and I cut them off, and then I tapped a hole in one of them so that it could take a bolt. And so the piece here that was nice was now I was kind of customizing it to make it a little bit easier for the install. So you can see there where I've got it installed in place. It's more or less under the dash. You will see it when you sit in, but I'm not trying to fool anybody that there's not air conditioning in there. These dashes, at least the underside of them, were so small that you really couldn't squeeze much under there. So my hope is that once this air conditioning unit is in place, it won't conflict with anything else that's been placed underneath the dash. The mock-up of the AC unit looked good to me, so it was time to make the brackets permanent. I used a 3/8 inch flat bar, cut it up into the corresponding lengths, and then just used a brake in order to bend them into the various shapes. 3 of them were L-shaped, and then one of them was kind of this tricky Z-shaped one, and they all seem to fit, and hopefully the requirement by Vintage Air to have their AC unit be both plumb and level has a little bit of wiggle room in there, because mine is just a hair or so off. Here's what the final product looked like before I put some drill holes into them. I drilled out the holes on obviously either end. In a couple of cases, I actually tapped the hole to make it easier for install. Here's the final mock-up install with the heavier duty brackets that I made. I was pretty happy with how this all turned out. I was surprised it came out, honestly, as good as it did. There's obviously bracket number 1 and then bracket number 2 against there on the firewall. The third one was closer to the dash where the gauges are. I didn't want it to conflict too much, and then the last one where the air scoop is. Next episode, I'm going to be doing the installation of both brackets to support the steering column and hopefully install something that looks like a steering column. Thank you for joining. Like, subscribe, and comment.